Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I am your Washington Realtors Legal Hotline, and this video is part of a continuing series on the Fair Housing Act. And today we're going to talk about what a real estate broker should do if their client instructs them to violate the Fair Housing Act. Now, more often than not, in fact, probably 99 out of 100 times that the Fair Housing Act is violated, certainly by a Realtor member, it's done unintentionally. I would be the last to believe that Washington Realtor members intentionally violate the Fair Housing Act. But there are certainly unintentional violations of the Fair Housing Act. And sellers can commit those unintentional violations as well as brokers. So let's say the seller says to you in a multiple offer scenario, this buyer's not the strongest and their offer's not the best, but I don't like this buyer and I don't want to sell to this buyer. Well, if the only distinguishing feature between the two buyers is the fact that this buyer is in a protected class and you have every reason to believe that's the basis for the seller's objection, then you've got a problem. Seller, we can't justify your selection of this offer from a buyer who is financially weaker than the other buyer on terms that are less desirable than the terms presented by the other buyer. There's no business reason to justify your selection of this buyer. So your selection of this buyer, whether it's in your mind to be a violation of the Fair Housing Act or not, is likely to be construed as a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And seller, if you choose to proceed with accepting this buyer instead of this buyer, here's what I have to do. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute and let you think about, or within your office setting, discuss what you think the seller's broker should do in this case. Okay, seller says to me, I'm the listing broker, seller says to me, I'm going to pick this buyer because I like them better. And they could even be so bold as to say, I like them better because of their race or their religion or their family makeup, etc., etc. I'm the listing broker. What I have to do in response is very clear. Seller, if I proceed to assist you in this transaction, then both I and my firm will be liable for a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And neither I nor my firm will participate in a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So with your continuance of accepting this offer, I will terminate the transaction. I will terminate our listing agreement. I can't stop you from accepting that offer. I can't stop the transaction from going forward. But I can choose not to participate in a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And with that said, I am terminating our agency relationship. I will not represent you as you move forward in this transaction. And moreover, seller, if this buyer files a fair housing complaint against you, I will likely be called to testify, and I will testify against you. I will testify about the conversations that we've had in which you've told me your reasons for wanting to select this buyer over this buyer. And my discussions back to you that there's no business reason to justify your selection of this buyer. And then finally, one more thing, seller. When you violate the Fair Housing Act and you injure this buyer over here, you're also injuring me. Because but for your violation of the Fair Housing Act, I would have been compensated for my efforts in this transaction. And so, seller, not only is this buyer likely to pursue a damages claim against you, but I will be pursuing a damages claim against you because As a result of your discrimination in violation of the Fair Housing Act, I forfeited a real estate commission. And probably most importantly of all, listing brokers, you document your file about what's happened. You explain what the seller's conversations were with you. You explain what your answers back, what your actions were in response. You document your file, because your documented file may be your best protection in the event there is a Fair Housing Act complaint filed at some point. Hopefully this doesn't ever come up in your practice area. Again, I think there are very, very few sellers who will intentionally violate the Fair Housing Act. And probably with your prompting of saying, seller, there's no business reason for you to accept this buyer's offer over this buyer's offer, hopefully you're going to bring that seller back into compliance with the Fair Housing Act, and this whole issue is resolved because of your good efforts. In any event, you make sure you stand strong. You stand strong with your explanation of why you can't proceed, hoping that the seller will correct their own actions, but if they don't, you get out of the transaction. Let me know if you have any questions on this issue or anything that we've talked about in this Fair Housing Act series, or of course, anything having to do with Washington real estate law. My email address is legalhotline@warealtor.org. I'd love to hear from you because you're a Washington Realtors member. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member. I'll look forward to seeing you here next week when we have more Fair Housing Act information to share. Have a great day.